let's see what you're going to cover in this course. So there are 5 sections in which this course has been divided in. The fundamentals, the basics, the attack techniques, the industry tools, and defending SQLi. In fundamentals, I'll cover the what, when, where, why, and how of SQL injections. And I'll show you the lab setup that you will need for this course. The basics will cover the basics of SQL. Again, it's not basics of SQL injection, it's basic of SQL. And then types of SQL injection. After that, we'll move on to the attack techniques, where I'll show you various attack techniques that you can implement in this world, and it's completely hands-on. Finally, I'll show you how to use industry-specific tools to use SQL injections and to leverage them efficiently and effectively. And we'll wrap up this with a lecture on defending SQL injections, where I'll show you the best practices that you should be following. And again, I'm not a programmer, so don't worry, I'll not show you the coding practices, I'll show you what the real stuff is. Let me go ahead and quickly introduce myself. Experience-wise, I've worked with multiple Fortune 500 companies and government bodies on highly complex and confidential projects, saving them over $25 million every year. Last year, we saved over $72 million if we combine everything. I have authored multiple international best-selling programs, as well as I am the author of the book called Pen Test Secrets, which is an Amazon's global bestseller. I have trained over 35,000 CISOs who are today leading the world's InfoSec economy. I hold the CCISO, LPT Master, ECSA, CEH, CHFI, CEI as some of my EC Council credentials. I have been a former board member for CEH Governance Board for India, Middle East and Africa region, and KVM board members of EC Council in Asia Pacific region. My core expertise is in managing double-blind penetration tests, which are budgeted at least $100,000 or above. Here's the disclaimer. Sagar Bansal group of companies are partners and affiliates. YouTube, its partners and affiliates are not responsible for any of the actions you take after completing this course or watching this video. Any numbers claimed within this video are for reference purposes only. Any trademarks used in this video are the intellectual property of their respective owners, and the video contains professional penetration testing knowledge, and everything has been done in a controlled, simulated environment. What are SQL injections and why do they occur? It's an interesting question because SQL injection is one of the top 10 vulnerabilities as per OWASP, and it's been there for years and still we see it. Let me tell you a story before I get started. So this year in February, we bought this car on my birthday. Now, it's a Mercedes-Benz C-Class and there is no Benz showroom in my city. So we had to take the delivery from another city. However, when we were taking it out of showroom, there was a checkpoint. On the checkpoint, there was a camera which scans the number plate of the car. On the number plate, it scans that number and compares that number in the database. And if the car is involved in some kind of fraud, or if there is some ticket pending, or if there is some criminal charges, it will not open. However, we just bought this car 5 minutes ago. It doesn't even have a number plate. That was completely blank. Now here, I have two options. I could even wait there for a whole day, get a number plate, maybe a temporary one, and then pass through the checkpoint. Or what I did is I wrote the special characters, which is SAGAR, single quote, or 1 equals 1. Now this is a special query. When you put this in any database, it will always return true, and the checkpoint compared this thing in the database and checkpoint said, yeah, allow this car, and it just opened and I took my car. And that's how I passed that checkpoint, by putting an SQL injection. Now, let me explain how this statement bypasses any checkpoint. You see, think about a login page. How does a login page look like? There is a username, there is a password, and there is a login button, right? That's the front end, but think about the back end. In the back end, there is a lot of code, as you can see on your screen right now. You don't need to learn coding, but try to focus on that red part of the code. That is the code which is responsible to check if your password and username is true or not. Let me make it more easier. So this is the simplified version of the code. In this code, it's asking select start from login where username equals something, password equals something. So there is the field username, there is the field password. In a login form, you fill these fields and it goes to the database and it checks, hey, is there any user in the login table which has the username of Sagar and password as Bansal? If there is, it will return a result. If there is not, it will not return a result. So the parameter here, we can choose any of these. Let's say password. This is the expected input. Password equals XYZ. But a hacker like me will not give XYZ. I will give X single quote YZ. Now, do you see what just happened here? That X was supposed to be closing with XYZ and then that single quote. However, I just added a single quote and now I have two statements. Password equals X. And then there is another statement which is Y, Z and single quote. Now once I am able to do that, I can write an exploit like select star from login where username equals Sagar and password equal X or 1 equals 1. So the system will check, okay, is there any user which is Sagar and is the password X? Or just check if 1 is equal to 1, which is always true. That is a tautology. 1 is always equal to 1, which means that the result will be true and it will return a true statement and I will be able to log in. This is the reason SQL injection occurs. When you are able to control the database, put some data and manipulate it according to your wish, that's why SQL injection becomes so deadly. Of course, we'll be talking about how to make these queries, how to write this code in later lectures, but this is the concept. That is how SQL injection works. This is the reason of SQL injections to exist. When user is able to give certain data and control the database with that data, that is where an SQL injection comes into the picture. In this lecture, we will go ahead and configure our lab which we'll be using for this course. For that, I want you to download XAMPP for Windows. If you're using Linux, then download XAMPP for Linux. Or if you're using OS X, then use XAMPP for OS X. The PHP version which I would recommend should be 7.2.33. Just go ahead, download this and install. It's a simple next install, so I'll not show that right now. Once you have installed this, just go ahead and search for XAMPP Control Panel. That is the software which you will use to control this. Now here you have Apache, which is your web server, and MySQL, which we'll be using as a database. So go ahead and start both of these processes. Once you're done with that, you can close this window, you don't need it. And now go to your installation folder of XAMPP. In my case, that's installed in C drive. Here you will find MySQL. In MySQL, you have something called bin. And here you have all the files for MySQL. Open the command prompt or a terminal window in this location and type mysql-u space root. We want to log in as root and there is no password by default. Once you do that, you will be able to log into the database. Now here you have to create a database. So say create database and give it a name. The name should be SPVA. Once you do that, it should say OK query, one row affected. You can run show databases query to see if the database exists or not. Once this is done, you can close the terminal and now you need the web application. You can download this web application from my website, sagarbansal.com. Here you can go to SBVA, which is Sagar Bansal's vulnerable application. And you can click on download now to download this application. This is the SPVA folder. Let's open it, copy everything. Again, go to your XAMPP installation folder. This time, find a folder called httdocs, this one. By default, if there are some files in this folder, delete everything. That's all good. If this folder is empty, just go ahead and paste this. It's the same thing. You delete it, make it empty, and paste all the files which you downloaded from my website. Now once this is done, you just need to go ahead and open in your browser localhost /setup.php. Once you do that, the application will be ready to install. You don't have to do any other configuration. You can go ahead, click on this login page and try to exploit this login page. That is how you set up this environment. However, in this course, I will also be using an online application called Test.php. Once you search Test.php on Google, it'll say home of Equinetics R. This website is owned by Equinetics company and it's a testing website. As you can see, testphp.worldweb.com. On this website, there is browse categories. In that, there is paintings. This sometimes gives you an error because someone else in some other country is trying to hack this website, as this is made for hacking. That's all good. Just refresh the website. It will load eventually. And this is the page which we will be exploiting in the course. So this page and SBVA application, both of the things that makes up our lab. The basics of MySQL. It's really important for you to understand basics of writing SQL queries. Of course, I will not be teaching you all the SQL language in one shot. And of course, it's not an advanced SQL class. But you need to know very basic language so that you can use them to understand the SQL injection queries. For that, I need you to log into your MySQL console. Now, the first command is show databases, which will give you all the databases that you have. Next command is create databases. And you can create any database. In this case, I'm creating a database called X. And you see, query one row affected. If you run the show database again, you will see you got a new database. Next command is to select the database. So you say use and the database name, which is use X. Now we are in the X, which is determined by this column here. Now let's see if there is any table in this. Show tables for that. However, it's an empty set because there is no table. Let's create a table then. So I'm going to create a table called users. Now the reason I have these braces here is because I will be putting what kind of data will be stored in this users. The data will be, first of all, name. Now the name is the name of the column, okay? That's the name of the column where the data will be stored. But what type of data? There are certain types in SQL and it depends on the product that you're using. In my case, I'm using MariaDB implementation of SQL. So the type which I have to use is varchar. And in varchar, I have to tell it how many characters the name can be. Let's go 100 characters. So someone can type a name which will be stored in the name, which will be of varchar type, which is characters, and that will be 100 characters. Let's press enter. And you see query OK, 0 rows affected. Let me show you the tables now. You can see we got a table called users. If I select everything from users by using the select query, where star means everything, so select everything that's there in the user. Show me everything that's there in the users. You will see it says empty set. However, I can go ahead and add something here by putting insert into values. So I can use insert into table name, which is users. I can insert into this users table, values, and I need to give the values. Since I only have one column, which is name, I'll give the values here. If I'm using name, I have to use double quotes, and I can give a name like Sagar. I can press enter, and you see one row affected. If I do select star, you will see there is a column name and there is a value which is in Sagar. Similarly, I can add more users by using the same query and saying second user as Alice, and third user as Bob. And if we try to see the users, and you can see there are 3 records which are these, which are in the column of name, which are in the table of users, which are in the database called X. I can delete some stuff, let's say the whole database, by saying drop database X. You can do the same for tables as well. Drop table and the table name. As soon as I do drop database X, you can see it says none here and there is no database now. So if I just show you the databases, you can see we don't have X anymore. That's how you delete the database. Now there are three functions that I want to explain. The function of user, so I can say select user. You can see it gives us the output of user running on the server. So we are running this as root. There is another function called version, which is going to give us the version number of the database. And there is another function called database, which will throw us null because we are not using any database. However, if an application is using a database like use SPVA, now my application is using SPVA database. If I do select database, you will see that it gives the database as the result. So these three functions can be really helpful while gathering data in SQL injections. This is the core basic that you need to understand. There are many things like OR, AND, WHERE, order by, group by, but this is not an SQL class. Though I will be explaining all of these things in the course whenever I can, but you can always use Google as your friend. The classic injection bypass. Well, a classic injection bypass can occur at any place. For this example, I will be using an application that I developed. It's called SPVA, Sagar Bansal's vulnerable application. So you can go to this login page, and this is the place where I'll show you how to do a classic injection bypass, because this is the easiest to understand. Now it's a simple login page. If I do anything like admin, which is a wrong username and password, it will not throw any error and not even say that the username is wrong or the password is wrong. It's completely disabled with the errors. However, if I use a correct username, which is Sagar, and if I use a correct password, which is Bansal, it'll go ahead and log me in, as you can see. Now I can log out, and this is the place where I'll try to do a classic injection bypass. First of all, we need to understand how the code of this application is working. To make it easy for you, let me show you the command line, and I'm going to show you the tables here. There are two tables. We will use login table. I can see in the login table there are just three entries: ID, username, password. ID is 1, username is Sagar, password is Bansal. Now what do you think the backend of that website is using? As PHP, the query might be select start from login, where username equals Sagar and password equals Bansal. Let me show you how. So this might be the query that the website is using. Select start from login, where username equals Sagar. Now you control this Sagar by putting it in the website over here in username field. And you also control this Bansal by putting it again in this field, which is password field. The ability to be able to control these fields, which are being directly used as an input in an SQL query, is very dangerous, and that is where you can do a classic injection bypass. Let's look at it carefully. Since I am the one who controls what I will put in the Sagar, can I not go ahead and put SAG in a double quotes space? Now do you see what just happened? I just created SAG as the variable, and I have got the ability to write some code here, and this all is an additional thing. It was not supposed to exist, right? This was never supposed to exist. It was supposed to be and here. Well, I just break this double quotes by putting a double quotes.
And that's where the classic injection bypass works. So instead of this thing, I may put Sagar and a double quotes to break and then or 1 equals 1, which is basically that check if username is Sagar or 1 equals 1. That is a classic injection bypass. However, there is a small problem in this. This quote is never supposed to be here, and this quote is never supposed to be here. In such a case, we may go ahead and utilize this quote by putting one quote here, one here, and one here. And similarly, we may use it by putting it one here, and one here. Now, this is a perfect SQL statement. Select star from login where username equals Sagar or 1 equals 1 and password equals Bansal or 1 equals 1. So basically, I can go ahead and press enter and this will work. However, even if I give it a wrong username and password like admin this time, this will still work because the statement of where clause is being nullified by the statement of or clause in both of the cases. This password and this username doesn't matter until 1 is equal to 1, and this will always be equal to 1 because this is a tautology. So that is how you do an SQL injection bypass. There are many other ways to do that. Maybe you cannot put these double quotes in certain situations. Then how do you do that? So for an example, if you're breaking it from here and you're typing or 1 equals 1, then you may want to go ahead and remove the whole part from here by commenting it out. Comments in SQL depends on the product. In MySQL, you can use a hash sign or a minus minus sign or minus minus space minus sign or a slash asterisk sign. There are many ways to comments and some will work, some will not work. So you have to try all of them. Let's try with hash. As soon as I press hash, all of the preceding code will be marked as a comment. So my query is select star from login where username equals Sagar or 1 equals 1. That's it. Everything else is being ignored. Now let me try to press enter and let's see if this works. And here you go. It's asking you for a semicolon because this semicolon is getting ignored. So there should be a semicolon before this comment sign. I'm going to press this, it'll work. However, a good query will be putting a semicolon over here before this SQL sign. And now you see, it works perfectly. So I can go ahead and try another type of comment like minus minus. That works as well. I may try minus minus space minus. In certain cases, minus minus doesn't work, so minus minus space minus may work. However, here you may say that, you know what, this is just getting commented out, so it doesn't matter whatever I press here. And, you know, I can even write this thing, it will all get commented out. However, as I said, in certain cases, minus minus doesn't work, minus minus space minus works. So you may want to keep that in mind. It works. I may want to try with a slash asterisk. This also works. And here you can see suddenly something has changed in my database and it doesn't look correct. So it is asking me for a star slash, you know, to close the comment. It's a multi-line comment. You can comment multiple lines by putting slash asterisk and then asterisk slash to close the comment. And it'll keep asking me for it until I close it. Now I am back in my database console. So we will not close it because if we close it, then this statement will not get commented out. Hence, in certain cases, we just keep it open. And the system automatically ignores this part sometimes. This one is risky, but works. Now that you know how it's working, let's go ahead and try to bypass the website itself. So I will put in a username, double quotes, or 1 equals 1, and then a hash sign. I will copy the same thing and put it in password, though it doesn't matter, so we're just commenting out the rest of the thing. Oh, we just forgot a semicolon here. Now let's try the login. Well, that didn't work. What just happened? Let me tell you one thing. In certain cases, this double quotes can be replaced by single quotes. It completely depends on what the developer has decided to use. So in this case, the website is not using a double quote. The website is using a single quote, which is a common practice. So the website is using these single quotes instead of double. Hence, to break out from it, I need to put a single quote here, not a double quote, and then I can press or 1 equals 1. So in the website, I will put a single quote here, not a double. And now I can press login. And you can see I was able to log in without putting any password. That is how a classic injection bypass works.
Types of SQL injection. There are multiple types of SQL injections which you should be aware of, because depending upon the target and the situation, you may have to switch between one type and another. There are two major categories of SQL injections. First one is in-band SQL injection, and second is inferential SQL injection. In-band SQL injection occurs when you are able to get the response from the website. It can be some data or it can be some error. So think about a database containing a lot of paintings. You're able to get those paintings depending upon your searches. You're searching for painting which has an ID of 1, which has an ID of 2, which has an ID of 3. Or you're searching that on the basis of price. Any painting which is costing less than $5,000. Any painting which is worth more than $20,000. Depending upon all of this, you'll be getting some data from the database. Those are data-based SQL injections. There you can use a technique called union-based SQL injection technique, where you will use the union command of SQL. I know it's being a little confusing. Don't worry, I'll be explaining what is union and how to do that in a whole separate lecture. But just understand, when you are able to get data from the application, you will most probably go with the union-based technique. The second one is error-based injection. In certain websites, you might have seen that when you do a search or you click on a button, it sometimes throws an error. That error is coming because there is some problem in the database. And when we are able to take advantage of the errors to inject our SQL, that is where we use the error-based injection techniques. Again, I'll have a separate lecture on this. So till now, you understood that there are two categories: in-band SQL injections and inferential SQL injections. In in-band, you have the database technique called union-based injection and the error-based technique called error-based injection. Now, coming on the inferential injection. In certain cases, you will not get the error, neither the data. There, you have to analyze the behavior of the application. Either you are logging in or you are not logging in. It's not throwing any error, that password is wrong, username is wrong. It's not giving you an error. It's just letting you log in or you're not able to log in. That's where you analyze the behavior. Am I able to log in? That is a true statement. Is it not allowing me to log in? That is a false statement. This true and false is called as Boolean injection technique. Similarly, you can observe the time taken by the server. When you request a page, it may take 5 seconds to open that whole page. In certain cases, it may take 20 seconds to open the same page. That is where you can analyze the time taken by the server to process some requests. And that is known as the time-based injection techniques. So as a recap, in inferential, we do not rely on data or errors rather than the behavior of the application. Either we will get true or false behavior, which will lead to the Boolean injection technique, or we'll get some time differentiations, which will lead to time-based injection techniques. Well, there even exists a third type of technique, which is called as out-of-band injections. The reason I'm not discussing this, and we will not even be covering this in the course, is that out-of-band is a very rare situation. It is not even applicable in every SQL product. For an example, this normally is found on databases which are from a brand called Oracle. There is a special package in that called UTL_HTTP, with which we can get the response in our Netcat listener. So you can set up a Netcat listener and you can get response of your queries in your listener. It's highly rare situation and it will not fit the scope of this course. That's the reason we will ignore out of the band. But in a nutshell, out-of-band SQL injections are the injections which do not occur on the application, rather in the background they occur somewhere else, like a Netcat listener being hosted by you. So these are the three categories of SQL injections, and we will be covering the first two in the following lectures in detail.
Union-based SQL injection. Well, a union-based SQL injection occurs when we are able to use the union operator to combine the output of two select statements. As you can see in the following screen, this first image, which has some lorem ipsum text and has an author name with a link and actually an image, is the result of the website's default code. However, I was able to create a virtual image, which you can see right here, which doesn't exist, which has a name as the database user. Instead of the description, it has the database itself, and instead of the painter name, it has the version information of the database. So I was able to create a virtual row and extract data through that. Seems complicated, right? Let me make it easy for you. I have two tables in this database. First one is login. If we see the login table, there are three columns: ID, username, password. ID is 1, username is Sagar, password is Bansal. Just one record. Now, if I use union operator and I try to combine 1, 2, 3, I will be able to combine another row which has the value 1, 2, 3. Let me show you how that works. As you can see, I just typed select star from login, union, select 1, 2, 3. And there is certainly another row which has the value 1, 2, 3. This will only work when you are giving the exact number of columns. If I try to give only 1 and 2, it'll throw an error because the third column will not have a value to put in. As you can see, when I try to give only select 1 and 2, it says the select statement have a different number of columns. So it should always be the same number of columns which you are putting here. Now I can go ahead and extract data. Instead of 3, I can put version. And it'll throw up the version number. Instead of 1, I can put username. And it'll throw the user. Instead of 1, I can put the database. And it'll throw the database name. Seems easy, right? So I can just copy this thing and take it to this website and run it, and it will work. Will it? Well, no, it won't. It'll throw an error. Let me show you what. You can see it says the select statement has different number of columns. You cannot expect them using 3 number of columns, right? So they might be using 4 columns or 5 columns or 6 columns. There are 2 ways to find columns. First is brute forcing, where you can try select 1. That doesn't work. Then you can try select 1 and 2. That also doesn't work, and you can then try select 1, 2, 3. That will also not work. But this method may take a lot of time. Hence, we can use an efficient method which is order by clause. Instead of putting select statement, I can put order by. And I can say order by 20. And it says unknown column 20 in order clause. This means that the number of column is less than 20. If I try 10 now, it works, which means the number of columns is either 10 or more than 10. So now I know they are in the range of 10 to 20. I can use a middle range, which is 15. and that throws an error. So unknown column 15. It means our columns are in between the range of 10 and 15. Now I can put 13. It still throws an error, which means our number of columns is either 10, 11 or 12. I can put 11. That works. So either 11 or 12. Well, 12 throws an error, which means the number of columns in this application are 11, which gives us the output. So I can say now select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now you can see it creates a virtual table, but point to understand here is not every column is accessible. I can see 7 here, I can see 2 here, I can see 9 here. So I can extract information through column number 7, through column number 2 and through column number 9. These are 3 columns where I'm getting the information. Hence, I can put my database, let's say in column number 2, in column number 7 I can put the user, and in column number 9 I can put the version. And you can see we were successfully able to find the username, the database name and the version. Can we take it forward? Of course, you can find any information that you like. Can you find other database? Yes. It depends on how deep you understand SQL language. So in order to find all the databases, there is a special table called information schema schemata. You can find that using this. There is a column called schema name in a table called schemata in a database called information schema. As you can see here, the first database is always information schema, which contains this table schemata, which has a table column called schema name, which has all of these entries. So if you query schema name from information schema.schemata, it'll show you all the databases. Can I take this thing from here and can I put it on the website? And now you can see we got first database information schema, second database acquired, and there are no other entries, which means this specific website only has 2 databases, information schema and acquired. I can go on and on with multiple examples. Just to give you one more examples on how to find the table names. So the query for that will be select table name from information schema.tables where table schema equals x, where x is the database which you want to find. In this case, I found the x where there is just one table called users. Can I take the same thing and put it on the website? Of course.
As you can see, I just found the table names. The query I used was table name from information schema.tables, where table schema equals acquired, because I wanted to find the tables in the database called acquired. And the table names are artists, cards, category, featured, guestbook, and so on. There is an interesting function that you can use here, which is group concat. Now, when you use this function called group concat, and in that I am asking for table name, you can see it doesn't give me a lot of results. It just groups all of them together over here, painted by artists, cats, cat tag, feature, guestbook, pictures, products, users. So everything in one line, super clean stuff. And that's how you do union-based SQL injections. Error-based SQL injection. Well, an error-based SQL injection occurs when you are able to trigger certain bug in the product which leads to some errors, and you have the ability to control those errors to extract data. In the following screen, you can see that I was able to create an error which is about a duplicate entry in the group key. But in this error, you can see I was also able to extract the version number of the database name, and the user of the database. This is what an error-based SQL injection is all about. Now, as I just said, this depends on the product and a bug in that product. You can see that this version is 5.1.7. Let me show you a page. Here you can see 5.7.14. So I'm using a much older version on that website. However, this bug ID 82544, this bug is valid in all the latest versions in 2020 as well. It was published in 2016, but even after 4 years, this has not been patched. And looking at the history, I don't think so it's going to be patched soon. So the bug is about a duplicate entry in the group key while doing a group by clause. If you go ahead and scroll down, you will see that you can create this error by selecting something, counting it, concatenating the stuff with ran function, concatenating with floor function from certain table, and grouping it by some value. Sounds complicated, right? Don't worry, I'll break all of this for you. So I'm going to show you all of this in my test environment. I do have the following databases. I will use X for this specific test. There is just one table in this database called users. In this specific table, there is one column called name, and there are 3 rows: Sagar, Alice, Bob. Now this error occurs when we are able to associate a random pattern. For that, the first step is to associate a random value for each of the results. To do that, we use the ran function. As you can see, when I select this column, which is name, it returns 3 rows, but I also selected a random function which is creating 3 random values in front of these. Since it is a random function, anytime I create this again and again, it'll create all new values. You can see when I type this again, all the values have changed. If I type it once more, all the values have changed again. These values are completely generated random, and they will range from 0 to 1. The next step to trigger this bug is to control the output of the random function. But I just told you it's completely random. You can use a seed value. Here, I will put a seed value like 0. Now, once I put a seed value, the result will always be same. This is what comes when I run it once. This is what comes when I run it twice. This is what comes when I run it thrice. You can see all the times it's generating
the same three values. Now the next step is to create a duplicate entry. But my question is, do you think this number has any probability to come on this place or on this place? These are billions of combinations, so the probability of this is almost impossible. For that, we will use a rounding function. Let me tell you how that works. So in the following example, I just added a round function on top of our rand function. Hence, it is rounding the values to the closest 0 or 1. And now there is a 100% probability that our value will repeat and there will be a duplicate entry since it will always be 0, 1, 1. It doesn't matter how many times I try this, it will always be 0, 1, 1. You can see it never changes. Now that we are able to generate random values which are still controlled by us, and we know that it's going to create 0, 1, 1, and this one is a duplicate entry of the above one, we can use the group by clause. Now you can see when I use group by and a round rand, the results are not 3 but rather 2, because this Bob is also having the value of 1 and Alice is also having the value of 1, hence they have been grouped together. Finally, to trigger the bug, we just need to put having min 0. And you can see duplicate entry 1 for the key group key. That's the bug. Another approach which the official guide says, instead of putting having min, you can put count. So the count will come here. And if I remove the having thing, I will still trigger the bug because bug is coming from count. Now this may sound interesting that this count is able to create the bug, but it's almost useless when using error-based injections. The reason is that most of the times this select something from something statement is locked and we can only modify this part. Just to give you an example, it may be select name from users where name equals Sagar, and then we can modify the group by round function. You can see this is a standard database query. Select name from users where name equals, and we put this name in some search box. The problem of this is it is always going to give you one result. However, we need at least 3 results for this bug to trigger. Hence we can put or 1 equal 1 to nullify this where statement. So think about it. Select name from users where name equals Sagar or 1 equal 1. Which is always true, hence it will select all the names giving the whole table. As you can see, it dumps the whole table. So now we can put our group by rand having min equal 0. And this triggers the bug. And this is the final output which we want as our payload. So I can copy this. I can go on this website. And you can see it normally takes a parameter called cat. When it gives a parameter called cat, it comes up with all these images. If I give a parameter of cat equals 2, you can see it comes up with only one result. So let me try to bypass this one. Cat equals 2. Since we already have or 1 equal 1, this will bypass the situation of cat and it will give us all the rows in the table and we'll group them by rand function having min equals 0. I'll put a comment here to ignore the other stuff. And you can see we get the error. Duplicate entry 1 key group key. This 1 is the result of our duplicate entry, and it's the result of our rand function, which is over here. So can we use it to extract data? Of course. Let me show you that how we can do it. Now you can see what I just did is I did a select name round rand, and then I did a concat version round rand. So the output of round rand is 0, 1, 1, which you can see over here 0, 1, 1, and I concatenated this with the version of the application. Hence you can see, since the version is constant and round rand is changing, we still have a perfect duplicate copy of 2 and 3. These are perfect duplicates because the version is constant and this part is changing. Hence, in the same way, we can concatenate whatever we want and we can extract data. A good example here will be you can see we got the database version, then we got X, which is the database name, as you can see over here. Then we got root at the localhost, which is the user. We can even put spaces in between. And this will just make it easier for us to identify that this is one thing, this is second, and this is third, and this is finally the rand. So I can just take this whole concatenation string here and put it instead of this round rand function. And we got the version number, the database name, and the user at the localhost. That is how error-based SQL injection works, and this is how we exfiltrate data through error-based SQL injections. Boolean-based SQL injection. Well, a Boolean is a situation of 0 or 1, which is false or true. There will be many cases where you will find these kind of situations. It can be a simple login page. If your password is correct, you will log in. If it is wrong, you will not. So it's 1 or 0 or 1. In this specific example, you can see if I try this specific command, which is cat equals to and database equals acquired. So I am putting a condition here. This application may be taking select star from something where cat equals to, which should give me this image. But I'm saying and database is equal to acquired. So I'm giving it a database name. If my database name is correct, this application will show me the result, which you can see over here. However, if I change this acquired to acquired1, which is not the database name, it will not show me the result, as you can see. This is where the Boolean injection can be used to get data. Now, how do you get data out of it? You can put a lot of conditions here, and you can use patterns like pattern, length pattern, substring. Let me show you with examples here.
I have this table called login. This table has an entry which is ID1, username Sagar, and password Bansal. Now a standard query will be select star from login where ID equals 1, and this will throw the table. If we say ID equals 2, which doesn't exist in the database, it'll say empty set, which means it will not show me anything. So instead of putting ID 2, I can say ID 1, and I know that the statement is true, and I can say and database equal SBVA, which is the name of this specific database. And since the statement is true, you can see we get the result. I can get the result even if the statement of first parameter is wrong. If it is where ID equals 2, I can use the command OR instead of putting AND. So select star from login where ID equals 2 or database equals SPVA. Now database is equal to SPVA for every single of them, hence it shows us the same table. So if the statement is false, you can use OR to get the data. If the statement is true, you can use AND to get the data. But the question is, how do you get the data? How do you know that the database name is SBVA? It's pretty simple. You can use the length function to find the length first of all. So I can say select star from login where ID equals 2 or length of the database is equal to 1, and it says empty set. I can try 2, it again says empty set. I can try 3, it again says empty set. But when I try 4, it gives me the result. This tells me that the length of the database is 4. Now we have to see what is the first character in this length. For that we can use substring. We can say select star from login where ID equals 2 or substring of the database function, check the first character and only check one character and see if it is A. However, if we are checking one character and if we are checking the first character, it is not A, it is S because the database name is SBVA. If I check S here, you can see we get the result. So you can brute force from A to Z by putting this kind of pattern. Also, you can check for the second character by replacing the first one. This will not give me any result. But if I change this S to B this time, it gives me the result. So the first character is S and the second character is B. Similarly, I can try for the third character, which is V, and I can try for the fourth character, which will give me a result on A. I can even try combinations, so instead of just one character, I can try 2 characters at the same time. I'm going to try 2 characters starting from first, which is S and B. You can see it gives me the result. I can try from second character 2 characters, which should be B and A in SPVA. So B and A. If I try SB, it won't give me the result, but if I try B and A, it'll give me the result. Well, that doesn't work because it is not BA, it is BV. And you can see SBVA. I can try the whole database itself by putting 1 and 4, which means start from first character and select 4 characters in the string, which is SBVA. And that gives me the output. I can even use the like function here to speed up the process.
You can see in this command I'm using select star from login where id equals 2 or database like %a%. Now what this percent means, it's a wildcard. It means check if there is a in the database name. It can be at any place. So any places before it, any places after it. You're just checking that. I can say check AB. That certainly isn't works. But if I check VA, that gives me the output because SB, VA are the last terms. I can remove the first percentage if I need to. We will make it VA, but we will not get any result because we are saying see if the database is like VA and then something, which is wrong because the database is like SBVA, not VA something. It's not VAN, VAB. It's SBVA. Instead, I can do is I can replace the last percentage and I can say check if database is like something which ends with VA. And this gives me the result. And that is how you can use the like function to find stuff. I can even say S underscore VA, which means I don't know what will be there in between this, but there is just one character which should give me the result. Or I can just put a percentage when I don't know the number of characters, which should again give me the result. It's all about pattern matching. Let's try to do the same thing on the website. So cat equals to and, because we know that cat statement is true, the length of the database as 1, which is not true and we don't get any output. Length of database as 2 doesn't work. Length as 4 doesn't work. Length as 6 certainly works because the database name is ACUART, A-C-U-A-R-T, which is 6 characters. And in this way, you can go ahead and try a lot of combinations and try to extract data bit by bit using Boolean-based SQL injections. Time-based SQL injections. Well, there will be certain cases where you will not be able to see any output on the screen. It will be the screen which is same in case of a valid statement or an invalid statement. In certain cases, instead of looking at the output, we can look at the time which the server takes to process the request or to send the response. In the following case, I am trying to ask the server that check if the database name is ACUART. If it is, then sleep for 10 seconds. So if I press enter, I don't get anything on my screen, but you can see the server is taking 10 seconds to give me the response. It's sleeping right now. And after 10 seconds, it'll send some response to me, which is again the same page. So on my response, nothing changes, but it took complete 10 seconds to show me the page. Instead, if I just put some random name here, it'll not take more than 2 seconds to give me the response. That is where I can justify if the statement is true or false just by looking at how much time the server is taking to give me the result. Just to make it simpler for you, I'm going to show you a few examples. There is a table called users. And you can see in this table there are 3 users, Sagar, Alice and Bob. However, let us assume that we do not have the ability to play with these users. Every time the output is just these 3 users. What can we do in such case? We can use sleep statement by combining it with AND. Select star from users and if. And here you will put your sleep statements. However, please note this depends on product to product. In case of this database, which is a MariaDB implementation of MySQL, the function works in condition, comma, true, comma, false, which means you put your condition. If the condition is true, then this will happen. If the condition is false, then this will happen. So if the condition is false, sleep for 5 seconds. If the condition is true, sleep for 2 seconds. And the condition is database equals A. If I try to run this, it throws an error. And the error occurs because there is no logical condition in this. You see, to use time-based injections, you need a logical condition like where, which you cannot control. So if the application instead of this is using where name equals Sagar. Now the application is checking for a logic. Select star from users where name equals Sagar. This is something which the application is checking. It's a logic condition. And then we are putting and also check if database equals A, then sleep for 2 seconds or 5 seconds. This will work. And you can see the database is sleeping. But how much? 2 or 5? You can see it slept for 5 seconds, which means database name is not A because it is X. So can I show you with the X? Of course. When I do it with the correct database name, it sleeps only for 2.002 seconds. 2 seconds because of the sleep function, 002 seconds to process the request. Again, 5 seconds because of the sleep function, 0.009 seconds to process the request. Similarly, we can use different patterns like length, and now we are comparing if the length of the database is 1 or none. And in this case, the length is 1. If we see if the length is 2 or not, it will say no because it will sleep for 5 seconds, giving me the confirmation that the length is not equal to 2. I can even use a greater than sign here. So if length is greater than 2, then sleep for 2 seconds. If not, then sleep for 5 seconds. As you can see, length is not greater than 2, it is less than 2. So I can say length is less than 2. And this will sleep only for 2 seconds, as you can see. So by such techniques, you can analyze the time of the database and conclude if a situation is true or false. I can even do length calculation here. So in this following example, I am checking if the length of the database equals 5, then sleep for 5 seconds, otherwise sleep for 10 seconds. 1, 2, and it throws an error. Let's see what the error is. Length. Okay. Did we do some mistake? Yes, we forgot to close the length function. So let's close it and let's try now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and maybe I'm counting too fast, and it just comes up with the result, and I can conclude that that was definitely not 5 seconds. However, if I try it with a number of 6, which is actually the length, ACUART, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So do we get the output? Yes, we get the output. Right? That is kind of how it works. Let me go ahead and start a stopwatch instead. This should be easy. So I'm going to say
And do we get the result here? Here you go. We got the result in almost 4 seconds, but still, because I started it and it took 1 second to, come from browser to stopwatch, it took 1 second over there. If I do a wrong statement like 5, and if I reset that, and if I press enter, then let's see. We got the output in 11.51 seconds, and assume it was taking somewhere 12 seconds because I came from the browser to here. This was 1 more second. So roughly 12 seconds instead of 10. So that is the processing time it is taking. But it is definitely clear that if the request is true, it comes somewhere around 5. If the request is wrong, it comes somewhere around 10 because I am giving that in my assumptions, right? That is how you get to know if it is true or if it is false. And just like you use the length function, you can use the substring function to calculate the name of the database or to get any kind of information from this database. It all depends on how well you understand SQL. But that is how the time-based SQL injections work. Using semi-automated tools for SQL injection. Well, there will be certain situations which will be humanly impossible for you to test thousands and thousands of payloads with. Think about a login page. If you're bypassing a login page and they have used certain filters, it will not be easy for you to try all the possible combinations. That is where semi-automated tools come into the picture. Again, remember, these are just semi-automated. They are not fully automated. You still need to understand why SQL injection occurs, where do they occur, how do they occur, and what is the reasoning behind everything. And accordingly, you can use them to automate the heavy lifting. One of the tools which I personally like is called Burp Suite. There are alternatives like OS Zap. However, Burp Suite is a good and reputed tool. You can download it from postfigure.net. Just download the community edition and install it. It's available for all the operating systems. It's a simple next install, so I will not cover that part. In community edition, you cannot save the data, so you always have to start a temporary project. That's fine with us. You can start with the default of burps. That's also okay. Just start it. And now burp has started. Now there are many ways to use it. Everyone has a preference. However, in these new versions, they have started to make a built-in browser. If you go to this proxy, you will see there is a browser here. Open browser. This is a Chromium browser, and it's a specially configured one because it works with Burp Suite out of the box. Now here, just make sure you do turn off this intercept because you can see it automatically starts capturing a lot of requests, and we don't really need this. Just turn this off. Now go to your browser and open whatever you want to open. So I'll open my target, which is localhost, and here I'll go to login, and here I'll put certain username and password like Sagar as username and my pass as password. I see it doesn't really work. Of course, the password was wrong. So we were not able to log in. That is fine. We can go to burp, and if you go to HTTP history, you will see all the requests that have passed through burp using this specific browser. It may be hard to find that request in these much requests, so you can go to the target tab, and it's the graphical tree view. We are using localhost, and we are using login.php. It is interesting that this is not the right request. However, there is one more login.php which has certain %20 in that. But this is the right request. You can see username equals Sagar, password equals my pass. This is what I typed. So this is our request. Again, there are two requests, login.php, login.php %20 something. That is fine with us. We can send this request to repeater. Now you can see the repeater highlights,
And now you can do whatever you want with this request and send it from here, and the response will come over in this window. So first of all, let me try, instead of my pass, let me try the right password, which is Bansal. Let's try to send it. Now let's click on render to see how it works in the browser. And we were able to log in. As you can see, login. If I use a wrong password, we're still able to log in, which is interesting. The reason behind that is because this website uses cookies. Once you're logged in, the next request which you send doesn't matter because you have never pressed this logout button. So instead of pressing the logout button, which is practically not possible since it's just a response, I can go ahead and remove this cookie at all. Once there is no cookie, the website doesn't recognize me that I am logged in or not. It just processes the request. Let's try again. Now you can see I'm not logged in. If I type the right password, if I press send, I am logged in. If I again type the wrong password, I am not logged in. Though the request is working fine, however, I would suggest that you remove these additional characters from it. It doesn't really matter and it won't affect your testing, but the file name is login.php, not login.php, and these characters. So due to some processing, it certainly picks up these characters in the request. That is fine, you can safely remove them. And now this is a perfect post request going to login.php using HTTP 1.1. Again, if you didn't knew this, if you didn't remove that, still the request is working fine and you can use it. But I like to be a professional. Now we know that this request is working, so instead of using the right password and username, I'm just going to give a invalid username and a invalid password. Again, let's send it once more to confirm. It's working fine. Now we can send this thing to intruder. So send to intruder. You see the intruder tab highlights. I'll go here and it tells me what are you attacking. I am attacking localhost, that's correct. On port 80, that's correct, because I'm not using HTTPS. If I'm using HTTPS, then I'll have to put port 443 here or some other port depending on the configurations. But since I'm using HTTP, so I'll make sure this is untick here. Now let's go to positions, and the great thing about burp is it automatically positions everything. You see, these things are marked in green and they have been positioned automatically. That's the auto mode of burp suite. You see the auto here. However, in certain cases you may want to add something. Like if I want to add a position myself where I want to do SQL injection, I may want to go ahead and select this and I'll say add here. And now this is also marked as a position. I can clear all of these by pressing the clear button, and I can again just say auto to automatically select the right positions, which burp suite does very well. There are 4 modes: sniper, battery ram, pitchfork, and cluster bomb. All of them have different purposes. Sniper, for instance, will try 2 payloads, right? It's trying payload number 1 here, which will be my SQL injection code here, and then my code over here. But sniper will do that one by one. So for example, it will try my SQL injection here and keep the password as BANSA, whatever we have given in the input in the request. So it will only change one payload at a time. Then once that works, it will keep this as it is and it will change the password, which is the payload 2. So it will change payload 1, keep the second as it is, then it will keep the first as it is and change the payload 2. So it's one by one. That is what sniper is. Again, all of these 4 have different purposes. Battery RAM uses both of them together. So if I use battery RAM, it will change both of the payloads at the same time. You can study more about this on Portswigger website. It's irrelevant for this lesson. I'll just go with sniper. In payloads, you can select the position. Since sniper uses just one position, you can use one. And there are single list and other stuff here. One of them is brute forcer. where you can specify a brute forcing combination. We can specify a character list, minimum length and maximum length, but we are not brute forcing a password, right? Technically we are, but not through a brute forcer. We are doing it through SQL injections. So instead, let's go with a simple list, and you can load a list of test cases, or you can add a list here. Now I already have a list, so I'll click on load, and I'll load my payloads, and you see we have certain payloads in this list. You can create your own list. It's just a txt file, or you can just go ahead and add something like here. I can just click on add and that'll add it to the list. But I'll just stick with my list which I just loaded. Now there are 10 payloads in my list, and since Sniper uses one payload at a time for both of the positions, there will be 20 requests and 21 to be precise, because it will even generate a baseline request which will be using both of the parameters that we provided. So it will just go ahead and send this request as it is. That will be the baseline request. You can go ahead and click on start attack, and it gives you the warning. It's the free version, the community one. It will be slow. That's fine. We just have 21 requests. Now you can see the first one is always the baseline request. There is no position used. It's like the blank request. You see, the one which we gave. And then there are all the payloads that it has tried. For the position 1 it has tried this, then for the position 2 it has tried this over here. But how do you define which one worked and which one didn't? Well, you may go ahead and see what is the difference in these requests. All of them are having the same response code. I don't see any error or timeouts, but here in length you see all of the lengths are different. You can go ahead and click on response and render, and you can see what was the response of the request. None of these worked. However, if we see these 4000s, you see it has worked. So now these 4000 requests are all working. But there is much cleaner way to do that. I'll just close this, and instead there is fourth tab here which is options. I'll click on this. In options there are many, but we can set this grep match option. Just clear all of these. Make sure this flag is ticked and add something like welcome. Press add, and now it is set. The reason I have added welcome is I want to flag all those requests which have the word welcome. So basically, when I start this attack now, you will see it will start flagging the requests which have the word welcome, just like this one and this one and this one. Now once the attack is finished, which just happened, I can go ahead and filter it with the flags. So all of these 4 requests are the one which are resulting in a successful SQL injection. I can see if I go to response and render, this is the word which I just filtered for. When there is a successful login, it says welcome back. So I just flagged any response which has welcome word in it. That is why we are getting these flags. And now you know that these 4 payloads will work for your SQL injections. That is how you use semi-automated tools to uplift the hard work and do SQL injections. Using fully automated tools for SQL injections. Well, there are certain cases when you have to test an application which has thousands and thousands of pages. Even semi-automated tools cannot work for you. In those cases, you may want to run some fully automated tools just like SQL Map. You can go to sqlmap.org and download the zip file. Once you have the file, extract it to any location you want. In my case, I have extracted this file on my C drive directly. Here you can see a folder SQL Map, and there are all the files which you get in this zip which you just downloaded. Now just go ahead, open the command prompt or a terminal in case of Unix in the same folder, and now you can just type python sqlmap.py. Since I am using Python command, make sure Python is already installed in your system. If not, go on Google, download Python and install that. You can even do that from Microsoft Store in case of Windows. So I assume you can do that. Let's press enter. And you will see it loads SQL map and then gives me an error missing mandatory options DULMRGC and all the other stuff. That's all fine. Just click enter. And now instead of SQL map, just give it an option called -HH, which is extended help. As soon as you press that, you will see a lot of options which you can use in SQL map to do fully automated SQL injections. The first one which you need to understand is, of course, the URL. There are a lot of options, right? Here you go, -u -URL to give a specific target. Then the second which you need to understand, a minimum one, is the risk level. Here you see the level of tests to perform, 1 to 5, and default is 1. When you want to do complete testing, you would use the level 5, not level 1. The reason of having these levels is that maybe we just want to test something in a low level and we have a low bandwidth on our database. So if we use all the tests, we may crash the database. Same thing applies to risk. When you want to keep the risk of crashing the database, corrupting the tables, and even getting caught while doing a pen test, you don't want to do all of that, keep it on 1. However, you can increase it on 3 if it is a crystal ball test, just like we are doing right now. There are many other options. You can even choose the technique, which is -- technique, and you can choose between all the techniques like a Boolean based injection, error based injection, union based injection, etc., etc. Other options are also here. You can extract data if you want using database, table, column, user to select the things, and --dbs, --tables, --columns, and dump to extract the data. Let me show you an example here in practice. So I'll go ahead and use -u http localhost/login.php, and I'll give it a risk rating of 3 and level as 5. Let's press enter. Now you can see you have not declared cookies while server wants to set its own cookie, this one. So do you want to continue? Yes, that's fine. We can take this cookie. Now it's testing SQL injection, OR based, you see, Boolean based injections are being tested first. Then once it is done with Boolean, it'll start with some other tests like from union based. So it's going to do all the testing for us automatically. Now it's testing if the MySQL is less than this, more than this, using Boolean and PostgreSQL. So it's testing the version of the database right now. It's going to take some time. Let's leave it till then. And you can see it is asking us, it is recommended to perform only basic union tests if there is not at least one parameter, one potential other technique found. Do you want to reduce the number of requests? Well, this is going to reduce the number of tests which we are doing by reducing the number of level, and in this case I'm going to allow this because I don't want to wait for such a long time when I know there is an SQL injection. In a real life situation, you may not want to allow this and reduce the number of your tests. Now you can see SQL map ends up with an error saying nothing is injectable. It was not able to find any SQL injections with our current setup. Well, that is fine, it happens. There are many things which you can do to fix it. You can provide it with the fields to inject. So if I show you the help again, you will see there are certain fields which you can inject by putting --data. So let me see where they are. Here you go, --data. you can tell it that go ahead and inject it in this specific field by selecting dash dash data. This can be complicated for some people who do not know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, because you will have to find which field are we injecting the data in. In our case, we are injecting the data in these fields, username and password. But you need to know the name of these fields. So you may have to inspect the element and you may have to find that in this HTML, or you may want to intercept the request and find it there. An easy version will be just use Burp Suite. Go ahead and start a temporary project. Open your proxy, start your browser, go to localhost, go to login, and here go ahead and give it something like Sagar1. Login. I don't need the browser now. I will go to HTTP history or in the target, and I'll take this request, send it to repeater, and I'll just clean this request a little bit because these characters may cause problems. So this is login.php request, which is taking two parameters, this one and this one. Instead of these parameters, press a asterisk sign. Now once you add this asterisk sign, this is called SQL map payload marking. Now I can just save this to a file. I'll save it in my C drive, in my SQL map, the same directory where I'm running it. I'll save it, for example, any name like request.txt. I'll just say save. I'll close the Burp Suite, I don't need it now. And if you go ahead and run this time, instead of giving it a URL, you can specify the request file you created by -r request.txt. And you can go ahead and give it the levels and risk. Let's go with the default this time because that will be faster. And it'll say custom injection marker found. Do you want to process it? Of course, that's why we created it. And it says redirecting to this. Do you want to do that? Yes, we want to use HTTP localhost port 80 login.php. Yes, that's what we are testing. The result is a post request. Do you want to resend the original post data in the new location? Yes, we want to send the original data in this new location, which is login.php. Okay, it looks like the backend database is MySQL. Wow, it just found that, right? Do you want to skip testing payloads for specific other databases? Of course, we don't want to test others because if it is MySQL, then yes, let's just test for MySQL. For the remaining tests, do you want to include all the tests for MySQL, extending the level 1 and the risk 1? Well, you can do that. In this case, I'm skipping it to make sure we complete this lecture on time. Let's see if it gets us the result this time. I can see over here, custom post parameter number 1. So the number 1 marker which we put in the username, it is testing that right now. And it says post parameter number 1 is vulnerable. Do you want to keep testing others? You know, in the real life situation, you can test it. And the second parameter is also vulnerable in our case. But I'm going to skip it right now because I found a vulnerable parameter. So that's all good. Now, these were the payloads that it has used for number 1. You can see username and then a single quotes and then select something 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 where something subselect something from subselect count. It's a long payload. I don't think I would be ever able to write this kind of complex payload from my hand. And that's where the automated SQL injections really stands out. You can copy this as it is and take it and find whatever data you want in the real website, or you can use SQL map to do that work for you as well. So this time I'll say, you know what, find me the databases, DBS. It'll find me the databases this time. And it says, do you want to use the marker? Yes, I want to use the marker. And we gotta redirect, that's fine. Yes, use the data. And now it'll just give me the databases because it knows that the first parameter is vulnerable. It has already saved all the data, and here are all the databases. I can find, let's say I can select the database SBVA and I can find the tables. Again, yes, yes, yes. And you see we got the tables, and these are the payloads that it is using. Starting from here, ending here. Again, super complex stuff. I cannot write that. Now, let's select the table. Let's say login. And let's say, you can find the columns, but I'll just dump it as it is. So yes, yes, yes. And here you go, we just dumped the whole table as it is. Instead of finding one column at a time, I dumped the whole table. If you want to find the columns also, you could have done that by pushing dash dash columns. And then it'll just, go ahead and find each column for you. Okay, invalid character, COLUMNS. Here we go. Now it finds the columns, and you can select a column and dump that. So, really depends, like dash C and, like ID and dash dash dump. So in this case, it'll only dump the column, or you can just dump the whole table by just ignoring this columns thing and just say dump over here itself. So it really depends, if the table is too big, you may want to do column wise. And here, this will only dump the first column, as I said. But again, you can always dump the whole table. No need to dump column wise if you know that the table is small. So that is how you use SQL map to do automated SQL injections. Defending SQL injections is not an easy task. That is the reason this old technique is still prevalent in the market. There are so many websites which daily get attacked due to SQL injection. There are many methods to do that. Most of the security practitioners will go with code sanitization, which will include things like input validation, parameterized queries, stored procedures, escaping, avoiding administrative privileges, those kind of secure coding practices. Since this is not a coding course, I will not cover how all of these actually works. I can give you a reference to ptsecurity.com, and they have a really good guide explaining how to securely code all of these things which I just mentioned. You can see input validation, they talk about it, and the code which you have to put and how do you have to put that. Parameterized queries, the code, and how you have to put that. However, I will tell you my specific approach, which is also one of the best industry practices. Instead of just focusing on the code and focusing on the development side, you should focus on a multi-layer defense. Now the multi-layer defense works in a minimum of 3 different layers. The first layer, of course, is the one which you see right now, which is the code. All of these techniques, you put that, you do secure coding, that is your multi-layer defense layer 1, secure coding practices. Layer 2 is including a web application firewall. This is a WAF which runs on WordPress CMS. You can scroll down and I'll show you all the available attacks which you are defending against. In my case, SQL injection is set on enable mode. So this WAF is going to stop any SQL injection attack that occurs on my website. Let me show you my logs, which will reveal a lot of IPs who have been attacking my site every single second. You can see there are number of IPs, and this is the current date, and I believe it's like 8 minutes ago someone got blocked. 10 minutes ago someone got blocked, 10 minutes ago, 12 minutes ago, 14 minutes ago. This happens when you have a huge website and actually a network of websites just like mine. So all of these are being blocked due to certain reasons, and the WAF is protecting that. Well, that's your second layer of defense. The third layer of defense is having a WAF placed on the edge, which is normally the DNS. In this case, I use Cloudflare. On Cloudflare, you can add a new site by clicking on this button and configuring the DNS. And in this, I will open my site. Here, I can go on firewall. and I can go on manage rules. Now again, this web application firewall is a paid product. It's not available in the free version, but I'm still showing you because that's how you have to do it in the real industry. I can go ahead and see these rule sets, and you can see I have selected some of them which applies on me. So because my website runs on PHP, I have applied this rule, and you can see over here all of these rules are being protected against. Then I have applied WordPress specific configurations, which are all of these rules being applied on my website. Similarly, there are flash rules and there are other stuffs as well. You can see it goes on and on and on. This is how you protect a device in a multi-layer defense. There are many more layers you can add. You can add an intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, an application delivery controller, a security orchestration automation response system, a managed monitor automation and response system, and much more, depending upon how much your organization is ready to spend and what level of security you are looking for. Let me show you an example. I'm going to go on my website and go to the search, and I will search Sagar quotes over 1 equals 1 and comment, and let's see what happens. Here you go, I just got blocked by Cloudflare, which is sitting on the edge side of my server. It doesn't even crosses this layer. Let's say someone was able to bypass this, they will have to face WordFence, and if they were able to bypass that, then my secure coding will stop the attacks. So I may even survive an attack where my code is vulnerable, but if I have the right security devices placed, then also majority of hackers won't be able to exploit anything. And that is how you protect against SQL injection attacks.